So we're excited today. Something we're doing at Modern Ag Solutions. Dakota Clark come to work for us about a year and a half ago and talked me into social media and podcast and trying to build a brand, I guess, if you will. So we're going to call this podcast Deep in the Kernel, brought to you by Modern Ag Solutions. And we're pretty fired up about our first guest today. Myself, Rich Mort, Brandon Shreves with Modern Ag Solutions will be interviewing and questioning Craig Benedict from Reynolds Farm Equipment. Craig is, I guess I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell us what you do there at Reynolds, what you work on, and what your hobbies are. We're just gonna see where this thing goes and let it be fluid and organic.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. So I went through 11th grade in school, high school, quit because I didn't think school was for me, and decided I wanted to go to work full time. And a year later, I moved to Indiana from Pennsylvania. Went to work at Reynolds Farm Equipment, John Deere dealer here local, and started out as a lawn and garden technician, but I knew I didn't want to stay there. There was only a limited amount of technology on a mower, and I liked technology. And so worked there about 6 to 8 months, and then moved over to the ag shop and became an ag technician. And did that for a few months until Gary and the Reynolds family came and said, hey, we need another road tech. So got a service truck and went out on the road. Didn't think I was really ready for it, but just kind of here you go, you'll learn as you go. And went on the road and did that for about 10 years, not quite, and then moved to the Integrated Solutions Department, which was created newly in about 2012. So Integrated Solutions is more focused on technology, precision ag equipment that John Deere has to offer, and precision technology in all different facets of the business. So combines, harvesting, spraying, application, all that stuff.
So your role in the amount of people that you manage and the things that you oversee, and we've known each other 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years. You're a very modest person, and you're not going to brag about yourself, but the level of things that you're involved in and the things that you do and helping growers and helping retailers and other companies out there, how in depth do you get in some of this stuff as far as, the John Deere operations tied to the equipment and the crazy things that you can do with a piece of farm equipment anymore? You've kind of got your thumb on the pulse of that, don't you?
Yeah, I try to. It's changing really quickly. And one of my goals when I started at Reynolds Farm Equipment, I said, was that I wanted to be at Reynolds for at least 20 years, and I also wanted to see fully autonomous farm equipment. That was the two things that I really had goals when I started out. And I think we're about ready to see both. I've already been there 20 years, but we're about ready to see the fully autonomous farm equipment. Hopefully this fall we'll have some running around the central Indiana area and tillage, and excited to see where that goes. I know we've had a few test cooperators here and there, but this would be a fully commercially available product from John Deere. So excited about that. Also, the way we look at helping our customers is different than it used to be. And so you ask about the different areas of a farm that we work with. And so when I first started out, it was just mainly hardware, big iron, smarter, faster. And then it gradually has changed into more technology and more solutions. So things like the Operations Center that we can track and monitor what you're doing all year long in the farming operation. Also at the end of the year, we can analyze, run reports, compare yields, compare treatments, different things like that. We also have a new tool, Agronomy Analyzer, and it's basically a plug into the Op Center. We're using that to compare trials, strip trials in the field. So I don't want to get into a whole advertisement for John Deere and Reynolds Farm Equipment, but that's that's part of what I do, and the best part about it to me is that I can get to know the farmer's operation better, and that I like to feel like I'm adding value to the farm rather than just supporting or selling farm equipment.
Do you really feel like in today's world that the average grower truly understands what the capabilities are of some of this equipment, using John Deere operations, integrating things, and taking that data and making real world decisions that benefit them in their operation? Because we started off with Apex in 2013, and what I've seen John Deere operations evolve to is crazy, and I feel like I fully understand 5 to 10% of what the capabilities of that really is.
Yeah, I think a lot of farmers do understand what the capabilities are there, but the capabilities that they're willing to implement on their farm is a different story, different scenario. And I think it's more of a trajectory. Like, here's where we want to be in 5 years. We want to be fully using the Operations Center to its full potential in 5 years, but we're going to take steps each year. We're going to draw boundaries this year. Next year, we're going to make sure we have JD Link or telematics system on our combine. The next year, we're going to look at doing AutoPath from boundaries, things like that. It's more of a gentle upward slope towards reaching the full potential of the technology on the equipment and the technology in the software space.
Do you find that the technology and then the person that's necessarily using it, say grower, I guess where I'm going with this is me and him went to a meeting today of probably 50, 60 growers this morning, and we looked around the room and we're like, what do you think the average age of everybody in here? And it was probably low 60s. And I don't know about you, but I know my parents, and that being able to do what that can, you get your capabilities are. Do you see that there's a lag between the older generation and the newer?
Oh, I'll answer that. Bill Moore, I'll call him out by name. He's when it comes to the John Deere software and the John Deere hardware inside these cabs, and it's a challenge. I mean, just keeping the client, farm, and field name straight, and making sure that we're pulling into that field, and it's just an ongoing settings and making sure things are set right. And we're going to, for ourselves this year, we're going to try to implement being able to pull in that boundary, and those things pop up and generate automatically where someone just clicks and selects and they know the task that they've got in hand. But there's a real lag in where I feel like, even for myself, there's a real lag in where the capability is and what you can fully do to make it maximize efficiency to what my level of intellect is using it.
Yeah, I think you've got quite a range there. There are some 60, 70-year-old farmers who really embrace the technology, and they can pick it up pretty quickly, surprisingly fast. You've also got younger guys who are a little more technology adverse. They aren't as interested in picking up the technology. So part of what we have to do, I think, is we have to make it easier for them. So if the customer is willing to use all the technology but is not going to invest the time, or doesn't want to, or doesn't know how to draw boundaries, then that's something we've got to help them so that they can utilize the full technology package. For some of the older farmers, we're just a little bit more involved on trying to make that a seamless experience for them so that they can get the benefit out of the machine as well. So there is a difference, but I wouldn't say it's always tied to age.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we wanted to talk about, we're, depending on whose operation you're talking about, we're somewhere in that 45 to 60 days to where we'll start seeing planters hit the field, pre-plant anhydrous and general tillage work starting to get going. And one of the things we wanted to address about and discuss is I feel like you have a handle and understanding of planter performance and how this equipment works as good as anyone I know. And guys that are wanting to do a better job. Maybe it comes to singulation, keeping that ground contact, and maybe they're looking at upgrading planter performance packages, or we can go on and on and on about this and the different technologies that go along with it. But the guy that's sitting there in the shop, he's got his planter unfolded, he's got his seed boxes or his meters pulled off, he's got his seed tubes pulled out, and basically he's sitting there with a shank. What are you looking at? Whether that be making sure that we have the proper shimming and spacing on our disc openers, and do we have the right amount of tension on our gauge wheels back to our disc openers? Just checking something as simple as replacing the seed tube guards, or one of the things that I think guys maybe ignore too much is parallel arm bolts and bushings, and making sure those things are at the right specs. And just at your 20 years of experience of getting guys, and I know you've worked on everything from probably a 7,000, 7,200 all the way up to the latest and greatest 1795 in the high speed Exactamerc package. So what do you want guys look at, paying attention, trying to maybe add 5, 6, 7, 8 more bushel that they can do at the planter that's just kind of free of charge to them, just being paying attention to detail?
First, I would like to ask you a question. What kind of spring are we going to have? Is it going to be wet? Is it going to be dry? Is it going to be cold or warm?
I've ordered a crystal ball, and when it shows up, I'll give you the answer. So far, it just has not shown up yet.
That affects planters a little bit.
Absolutely.
How deep we're going to plant, populations, various things like that. So I think with planters, regardless of what planter you have, looking at the path of the seed. So you dump the seed in the hoppers. If you've got individual hoppers, you dump the seed in the CCS tanks if you've got CCS. But look at that. Think about the path of that seed. You got to get it through the hoses out to the row. You've got to get it down this into the seed meter. So in that seed pool down in the bottom, the seed disc got to pick it up, spin it around, singulate it, and drop it. Whether that's through a brush belt or whether that's through a seed tube, it's got to get down to the row. So just looking at that whole path and thinking and just analyzing that whole path. Where are spots where there could be a ripple because there's a little wear in a seed tube, where the path of the seed's been constantly wearing down through one spot. Any ripples like that could affect your spacing and end up costing you yield. So just generic common sense looking at the path of the seed. Secondly, there's a lot of intricacies you can get into, like you were talking about seed tube guard, seed tube, making sure they're all tight, the tabs are not broken off. With brush belts on things like Exactamerc planters, making sure that the bristles aren't shortening in the middle where the seed runs. We want to make sure that bristle is holding the seed good, trapping it all the way down to the bottom of the seed trench and releasing. Seed sensors, making sure that they're free of dust, at least to start out the year, and that the lenses are good and solid in there, no dirt and debris in behind the lenses. And then the meter itself, it's always a good idea to take the plates off, spray some graphite on them, give them a little bit of lubrication to start the year so you have a little less wear there.
One of the things, I guess I interrupt you here, but, 15 years ago, Precision Planting got this basically...
Ooh.
Yeah, sure, but they come out with this seed tube or the seed stand, and guys were they made some tweaks to the things, and they made some real differences, and made guys look at things a little bit differently. And I know you're a John Deere guy, but I think they did open some eyes to some people and improve our planting condition. But that being said, with the monitors and the technology that are on these planters today, you've got your own seed stand right there in the cab to be able to run and do. And you paid someone to make those adjustments and to spray a seed disc down with a graphite spray and, just an overall inspection. But now these farmers, there's less and less of that going on because of the technology of these planters. So is there anything in that meter, anything and they've kind of made it pretty simplistic. But adjustments that these guys can make just in the meter that maybe they were hiring, Reynolds Farm Equipment to do or someone else to do, can they do that themselves there at the field while they run a calibration?
Yeah, so with any of the electric planters, you have the ability to run an individual row, or you can run the whole planter as a unit and look at things like singulation and spacing, and adjust vacuum levels depending on different hybrids that you're going to plant. So that's a big thing that now you can do. You can do it on your own. But looking at that seed bowl or seed disc to the meter adjustment, you can adjust that hub height to get that thing up there close and see how it adjusts or see how it changes your spacing, your singulation on the meter when you run those tests from the display in the cab. Also have the ability to do that remotely with your phone. So you can stand back by the back of the planter, pick a row 12, and hit start, and it will actually run that row, and you can pick your population and change the vacuum a little bit and things like that and rerun it. So that's handy in helping to get that row run off. Other things we're looking at is where the seed comes around and you've got either brushes or a singulator of some type, making sure that's still in place where it needs to be. It's not all worn and flopping around and going to knock extra seeds off. Because, agronomically, I am not an agronomist, but agronomically I do know that a double is better than a skip. So we want to make sure that thing's not flopping around and knocking seeds off the bowl as it comes around or off the plate.
Sure. The other thing I kind of wanted to ask you about, you look at, we can go to 10 different operations, and whether they're minimal till or true conventional till or they're strip tilling or, maybe they're utilizing cover crops, and there's all these different companies out there with all these different planter attachments to try to identify and solve a problem that a farmer's dealing or facing. What is it that across your acres in our area here, from no-till to conventional, what is the thing? And, Bex and the PFR have got some closing wheel trials and so on and so forth, but what are some of the things that you see work in a lot of different environments across the board that people can maybe invest some of that money into and see a real return?
So I think I would like to start with the front of the planter, and that would be either seedbed prep using a vertical till or a field cultivator. So we've got to make sure that seedbed prep is good, consistent. That's more than anything. Making sure that whatever tool you're using ahead is level. If you're in no-till condition, that's fine as well. But just if you're doing tillage, make sure that tool is level. And then row cleaners. I'm a big firm believer in row cleaners. And the main reason I like row cleaners is to get the residue out of that trench. We shouldn't be using them to do tillage, but we need to make sure we have some kind of row cleaner up there to push some debris out of the way so that those true V blades can make a nice firm trench sidewall, and we don't have a bunch of residue in there that a seed ends up laying in and not germinating, just rotting. So that would be the first thing. And then blades and gauge wheels are going to be kind of what they are. I mean, the standard is good option there. They're spoked and other things like that, but I don't know that they really change planter performance as far as yield. They're more of a clean out, self-clean out, and things like that. And then move to the back with the closing wheels. There's options such as, the Yetter twisters, the poly version or the cast version that are lighter weight than a traditional cast closing wheel. And in our area, I've seen big gains out of those. Studies are backing that up, but also just being on the farms, I'm seeing results from that. And what I really like about those is that they're, almost an inch thick, inch wide, but they have a spike on them. So the spikes are pushing some of that air out of the pocket or out of the seed trench and breaking up some clods if you've got that. But they're also wider, so they're firming down the loose soil in the trench compared to, say, a thinner spoked spike gauge wheel or a closing wheel, that would only crumble and not really pack and firm that trench.
And that the Yetter twister, that's got kind of a blunt end to it versus
Right.
and some of those guys, their big concerns with the more traditional spike is reaching down and grabbing some of that seed.
Yep.
If it and guys don't think about this, but if your closing wheel is not centered over where your true V is running, you could get some disturbance there of your seed, and these attention to detail and the little things end up making big gains. And I wanted to ask you, GBGI disc openers was the first time this was brought to my attention of them being a actual machined disc opener versus a stamped, and they had a heavier rivet and bearing and so on and so forth. And I know Deere has announced something, or maybe it's available already. I'm not sure, but it's available. So Deere has come out with something like that. And when guys, and this is totally your opinion, but is it worth that extra expense when you're going to buy that, whether you're in conventional till or no-till? Is it worth the extra expense to get that machined versus the stamped steel?
Yeah, so I definitely think that it is. And in the case of Deere, they've entirely replaced the old part number with the new part number. So if you just went to the counter and said, I need a True V blade for my 7000 planter all the way up to current, you're going to get that new style with the double row bearing, and it's more true. So it's no secret that John Deere's had some issues with True Vs and being true, running true, and to maintain that nice V on the bottom of the seed trench is attention to detail like you were talking about, but it requires a True V opener that's not going to be wobbling all over the place.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is you talked about row cleaners, and I'm a really big fan of them. And when we on our farm ourselves, we've kind of done some minimal till, some conventional till, and we're dipping our toe into strip till. I've become a really big fan of a row cleaner, especially a pneumatic one, and becoming less of a fan of the no-till coulter. You see guys that the first thing they do, they rip the no-till coulter off, and then you got guys that continue to run the no-till coulter today, even with the combo of having the row cleaner. What's your thoughts? Do you think that no-till coulter and the disturbance of that soil ahead of that True V opener can cause you some seed displacement, or do you think that thing's serving its purpose and should stay on the bar?
I think the best no-till coulter I've ever seen are the ones that are laying in the barn. I'm not a fan for a few reasons. There is one reason I think that a no-till coulter has some benefit, and that would be if you're in a rocky field with small rocks laying on top of the surface and you want to move them out of the way just a little bit so that you aren't hitting them with your True Vs. That's the only scenario I can come up with where a true or a no-till coulter would be a benefit. It does affect seed. It does affect the bottom of that trench. So a lot of times when you put new no-till coulters on, they stick slightly below your seed disc, your True Vs, and so that's messing up the bottom of that trench. It's not firm like it needs to be. When you hit a big rock that's in the ground, it pops the row unit up because those no-till coulters are fixed. There's no suspension, no hinge between that and the row unit. Picks the whole row unit up, and if you're going fast enough, 8 to 10 miles per hour, it picks it up and then just slams it down right on top of the True Vs, right on that rock. So the tests that we've done internally at Reynolds, we've run, especially in beans, we've run no-till coulters, we've run just True Vs, so nothing on the front, and we've run row cleaners. And the nothing and row cleaners, yield-wise, was very similar. The no-till coulters definitely did not give us an advantage and a slight detraction from yield.
So as much as I respect your input here, you are also Bill Mort's salesman. He still has no-till coulters and no pneumatic row cleaners. So I'm going to hang this on you that this is your fault that this isn't done.
There are challenges, and not everyone's ready to make the change for whatever reason. Opinions. There's a lot of opinions. Planters, I'll tell you, planters are one thing that you can go from farm to farm to farm like we do all day and you can never see two planters that are the same.
Well, that's
they've got a different fertilizer attachment. They've got a different no-till coulter, residue management system. They got a different closing wheel. They're just no two planters the same.
It's funny that you say that, because it leads into and you know, we have it's we're not trying to sell something to somebody that they don't need, but we've become really big believers in spoon feeding and banding fertility to our crop throughout the growing season. One of the ways that you do that, and John Deere really had the market cornered for a long time with the John Deere single disc fertilizer opener out in front of that bar. We still use one today. There's options out there of conceal through, and then, you know, they've got guys that's got the total tubulars where they've got feeding one out one side and two out this side, where in your 2x0x0. So, you know, there's just a lot of different options and different ways that guys can spoon feed a crop. And I you know, one of the biggest complaints guys have is the cost to maintain or rebuild that single disc John Deere fertilizer opener, and then having downtime when something goes wrong with it in the field, and they just want to keep planting corn or keep planting soybeans. So what, you know, you see this and see this across a lot of different farms, and, you know, the concoctions that guys have in their 2x2s or their in furrows. You know, you could sit here and all night long and talk about it, but I guess my question to you is what are you recommending to guys with new planters, or guys that maybe have John Deere single disc fertilizer openers that just truly needed a full in-depth rebuild? What are you leading guys to? What do you think the way they should be looking and going?
The first part to that answer is give me about a week, because the National Farm Machinery Show is happening, and there will be a whole lot of new ideas here in about 3 days. Yeah. So our joke is that this is when planter attachments start being sold and installed, is after the National Farm Machinery Show. A lot of ideas down there. You can see them all. You can touch them and get feedback from the representatives on what they can do. So that is a good feature for that show. My dream is, I want to start with that on the fertilizer opener. My dream is that there would be a frame-mounted 2x2x2 fertilizer opener that would go in front of the row unit. That would be my dream. Something that's frame-mounted. Again, don't want it on the row, but frame-mounted. I think there's enough research being done and results shown that 2x2, having it on both sides of the seed, there is benefit to that. And with 80% of our planters being sold with a liquid fertilizer system, I've learned that that's pretty unique to our area, to Indiana in general. You get outside of Indiana, and there's a lot of planters sold without fertilizer at all. So I realize we're talking about a smaller group. But I would like to see that up there where it's not affecting seed placement. The John Deere single disc fertilizer opener, there's two options. There are two editions of that. There's the edition that was up until 2018, and then after 2018, there was a change, and they updated the bearings, the blade where it goes against the disc. One of the problems we've always had is you had to adjust that little bolt and nut, and you had to continually adjust it as things wear. Otherwise, dirt could get wedged in there. The blade would quit turning. It would wear an oval shape on your blade, all that stuff, and they were expensive to repair. The updated ones have a spring pushing the boot against the blade, so it maintains that consistent pressure even while it wears.
And the reason for that update really was to be compatible with the speed that we could pull the planters with the new technology, correct?
Right. There's also less angle on that blade, so it's not throwing as much dirt as you're going along at higher speeds. As a replacement for that, we are seeing quite a few people put on a totally tubular or something, just a stainless tube out the back over the row or over the closing wheels. So one side or two sides, but just dribbling it on top of the ground, especially in conventional till operations.
So the guys that are concerned, because, you know, your 2x2 cost, depending on what rate you're running, could be anywhere from $15 to $40 an acre. You know, that's a chunk of money for these guys that's going over 1,000 acres of corn. do you see any? And their fear is that I'm going to lay this on top of the ground, and I'm going to leave this product that I've purchased exposed to the elements, and they're fearful that they're wasting their dollar. Have you seen any of that track throughout the coverage area that Reynolds has and the people you've worked with, or you think that's something that guys need to be less fearful of?
I think that they should be less fearful of it, but I understand the fear. We can't control weather, and so we don't know whether it is going to rain or whether we're going to have a dry spring. But one of the reasons I think you should be less fearful of it is if it doesn't rain after you plant, we have a lot bigger issue than whether our fertilizer is escaping, evaporating, or volatilizing. But the other thing is all the results that we've done, the test that we've done using the agronomy analyzer and Ops Center with customers have shown that there is no reduction in yield to doing that. And we've done that over the last 3 or 4 years. But the big benefit is it's like $40 a row to put that kit on the back. And on the front, you have a $1,600 single-disc fertilizer opener mounted to the frame. Now, it doesn't cost you that much to rebuild it, but that's what it would cost if you had to buy a new one and put on it. So the cost differentiation there is quite a bit.
So it's way more economical for guys that maybe they've got in furrow and they want to do 2x2, or maybe they're just trying to add something to. You would push them towards looking at the total tubular 2x0x0.
Yeah, at this time for sure. I think eventually someone will come out with a frame mounted 2x2x2 or 2x2x1 or something like that, but something frame mounted that we wouldn't be affecting the depth of the seed.
Well, the one of the things, and by no means do we ever want to put a product down, especially if I've never used it, and we've never used Conceal, but one of the things that I've heard over and over again is the Conceal in rocky conditions, adjusting all the time can be frustrating. And I know a John Deere single disc fertilizer opener can be frustrating if it's not working properly while you're trying to plant, but there's very little maintenance to that total tubular system.
That's right. Yeah, really, unless you backed into a pole or hit a pole going down the road, something to brush along the back of the closing wheels frames, you're not going to have any replacement, any wear parts there. And we're not dragging chains behind them to pull some dirt over or anything like that. And they seem to work really well in our test.
One of the other things that I think maybe get overlooked, and we talk to farmers and get a lot of questions about is, there's two things that you guys monitor now in these systems, and one is ground contact and quality of ride, and whether you're running springs or you're running a pneumatic air system or you're running hydraulic downforce, the key to this, and especially when you get in different soil types, is how much weight are we truly carrying on that gauge wheel, and are we causing ourselves sidewall compaction by carrying excess weight? And the other spectrum of that is to not have enough ground contact and not maximize our depths. And one of the things that guys don't, again, this is attention to detail, but your nodule roots on a corn plant are very absorbent, and when we don't get our kernel at the right depth when we're trying to plant, those nodule roots being exposed at the top and absorbing a chemical application that we don't want it to absorb. And we put stress factors on the plant doing so. But, it's tough when you get into a field that's got maybe 10, 12, 14 different soil types in it, and you're sitting there planting your corn and you're wondering how much margin I should be carrying on my gauge wheels. And obviously the technology of hydraulic downforce allows those changes to happen way faster. But, whether you're conventional till, minimal till, no till, what's the number that you kind of start off with that you want to be carrying on that excess weight?
Yeah, I think my goal is to start with 70 pounds. So I look at 70 pounds, it's 35 pounds per gauge wheel on either side. It's not that much. Ideally, then that's where I would start before I even put the planter in the ground. After that, we take off, we start running, and we'll stop a few times and get out and just kick the gauge wheels, see if they'll spin with the planter in the ground. and see how much contact there actually is there, making sure that the system's all working well. There's nothing that replaces getting out, walking back, and checking a few times, especially when you're starting out. And that way, I mean, you know as well as I do, the first pass that you plant every year, you've got to plant it at the back of the field so that nobody can see it. But still, just getting out a few times, looking at it, look what job it's doing, digging some seed, making sure the depth's where you want it. You can't do that often enough. And so I think starting at 70 pounds, checking the gauge wheels, but then as you're going across the field, what you hit on, the ride quality, I'm not as concerned about ride quality because that can change a lot depending on your tillage practice. It can change a lot depending on how chunky the soil is whenever you work it, if you're working the ground, or if you have root balls to deal with in no-till. But I am concerned with ground contact, because anytime we don't have ground contact, you know, you're messing with the seed depth, and that's our goal, is to try to keep a uniform depth all the time. So if we need to increase that margin to get better ground contact, then I will do that. However, there is a trade-off there. You don't want to get so high that you're starting to get smearing on the sidewalls or sidewall compaction.
Well, the reason I ask this is you know, I'm picking on my dad, and I love him dearly, but you know, and he had some choice words about this, and I can't. We're going to try to keep this PG-13, but you know, he was awfully frustrated. He bought a high-speed bean planter, and you're in a cornstalk no-till situation there, and you look at your quality of ride going through the field, and you're dipping down into the 70s, and you know, some guys, it's frustrating. You're questioning that, and is this right? But I've kind of said the same thing that you did, that the ground contact is a way more important number than my quality of ride. So what are you okay with from a guy that's, you know, in the black prairie and it's tabletop flat and smooth and work, versus a guy that's going into 220 bushel corn residue and no-tilling?
Yeah. So the first scenario, the tabletop flat and black prairie, you know, it's so easy. I mean, you can set the planter a lot of different. There's a big range there where you can adjust the planter, and you get firm sidewall but not too compacted, and you get ride quality at the same time. The second scenario is much more difficult because, and you just, at some level, you kind of have to ignore your ride quality. I mean, I'd hate to even put a number on that, because if you're going 5 miles an hour in tough residue conditions, you know, you can see 95% ride quality, maybe even dip into or hit 100 a couple times. But if you're trying to go 8 miles an hour, 9 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, get some acres covered, the ride quality is going to be 60, 70. But at the same time, if you go back and dig, the seeds are in the ground. The only place they're not in the ground is if the whole row went up and over a root ball. Sometimes that can't be helped. There's a trade-off, and you got to find a spot where you're happy with. It's if you want 100% ground contact and 100% ride quality, you have two options. One is you got to work the ground until it's really nice and soft and mellow. The second option is you've got to crank your downforce, your margin up so high that you're getting an extremely compacted.
Well, that leads me to another question. We've had a few guys comment over about this in the last few years. When we're sitting there and you've got row cleaners and you've got maybe a no-till coulter tucked between that row cleaner, and then you've got the row cleaner or the gauge wheels and your closing wheels, some guys, can we get some of that out of balance to where we're running too much force on our row cleaners, and we're actually getting we're trying to continue to crank down on our gauge wheel and the margin that we're carrying, and we're actually working against ourselves and end up getting some erratic depths on our corn seed?
Yeah, absolutely, because even on pneumatic row cleaners, we used to see it a lot more where they had the pin style floating row cleaner.
Nobody wants to get out of the tractor cab and change them.
That's right. And so what would happen is we would pin the row cleaners at a certain spot, and then we would change the depth. So you're lowering your true V's, you're raising your gauge wheels to get your depth, and you're not changing that fixed row cleaner that's mounted to the front of the row unit. So it's just digging deeper and deeper every time you adjust your settings on the planer to go deeper. And at some point, a lot of them have treader wheels on them and yeah, I've been out to the field before where the guy is complaining about the planer won't achieve the depth of seed that he would like, and his row cleaners are firmly on the ground on the treaders and they're pinned. And you can't overcome that, hydraulic downforce or not. So
well, it's kind of the same.
Sure that's floating and
yeah, and it's kind of the same way as some of these guys that buy VT tools, and the VT tool doesn't move as much dirt as they'd like. Some of these guys buy row cleaners, and they really want to move some dirt in that thing, right, and use it more as a tillage application than it is to just moving exactly what they're called, moving the trash out of the way. And we've ran across some of that, and it's just, you're sitting there and you get to the field and you're trying to make sure that everything's right and that you're set and ready to go, or you've been in that thing for a week and you've been running 12, 13 hours a day and maybe longer. And it's very easy to miss and not think about one of these crucial details that end up coming back and kind of biting you in the backside. So
yep.
Is there anything else that you feel like guys should be looking at, paying attention to, maybe the littlest thing, and I can't say this enough, the detail of something, and I'll be the first to admit, when the first couple days I'm planning, my attention to detail is significantly higher than the last couple days of planting, because you see the finish line. But this equipment and the technology's gotten so much smarter and kind of helps us recognize issues faster. But what is there anything we didn't cover, anything we didn't talk about that you think that guys should be looking for?
Well, I had a couple things. One, I'll hit on with fertilizer, but the second one is I'd like to talk a little bit about what I'm most excited about for planting in the future. So the fertilizer part, I think, is just as critical. I would say we almost deal with as many fertilizer-related planter performance issues after post-emergence than we do any mechanical issue post-emergence. So what I'm talking about is the crop comes up and there's a yellow spot, there's a short spot, there's a whatever you want to say in the corn and the beans. And at that time, it's a little difficult. You're doing a little detective work to try to figure out what went wrong so that it's not repeated next year. But it seems pretty frequently that is a fertilizer-related issue. And so I'm thinking of things like orifices being plugged, left over from the year before, so not flushing the systems out properly the year before. So if I was farming full-time, I like to think that I would get the planter out and I would run some water through it or something to at least test it before I went to the field, make sure all the orifices are free. Also strainers, just putting a strainer in the system somewhere, on the tender truck, on the planter, don't care. But that can save a lot of headache down the road. Also, while we've got a little bit of time here before planting starts, there are alternatives out there. Metering tubes is what they label them as. But basically they're a replacement for a little dime orifice. So anywhere you would have a 5/16, a 1/4 inch, 3/8 hose line, air line going to the row to supply fertilizer, you could replace that with a metering tube, which has a very specific inner diameter. And that inner diameter acts as a resistor and will increase your pressure on the planter so that you have the same pressure down through the rows, just the same as a dime orifice does. Except we're using the length of the tube to build that resistance instead of just a one small spot dime orifice. And what that does is that allows the inside diameter of the tube to be a lot bigger because you have that distance to add the resistance. And so therefore it's less likely to plug. But that's a great, very cheap upgrade to do on a planter. And there's specific lengths and sizes and things like that. But SurePoint, and that's the first one that comes to mind, but SurePoint has experts on hand that can tell you how to size those and supply them.
As farmers try to become more profitable, more progressive, and do things, some of these 2x2 and some of these in-furrow applications are getting pretty complex in some of the ingredients that they have in them. And guys don't always maybe do a bottle test or a jug test to make sure
Test. Yep.
compatibility there, and that always helps. Agitation sure seems to be able to help keep things from settling out and doing it. The exact apply that Deere has got on the planter now, and you can do that either in the 2x2 or in furrow. You cannot do both. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. At this time, you can only do one or the other. You can't have two systems on there exact rate at the same time. So,
and that's going to monitor row by row, and it's going to show you what your pressure is, what your rate is, and kind of let you know, because some of the planters that we run on our farm, we still have the ball,
red ball, or John Blue,
disengage.
Yep.
And it's gets covered. It seeps some, and you get dust on it, and then it's blocked. You can't see it, or you're running a darker liquid, and you can't see the ball floating in there, and you don't really know where you're at. There's a lot of frustrating things to buy that product, expect a result from applying that product, and then not get it applied properly.
Yeah, and those exact rate kits are available for almost all Deere planters that have electric drive. So any version of electric drive, whether it's been retrofitted or just from the factory. And they're pretty easy install. Farmers can do them on their own if they want to. But yeah, the red ball, the John Blues, they work. They're tried and true. But like you said, we're seeing more and more liquids with Xyway and different things incorporated into the fertilizer that's biologicals and things that make it a different color, and the balls don't show up. And to be honest, it seems like when you're on day one of planting and you're ready to go and you put the liquid in the planter and you can't see where those balls are, it's a bad time to be thinking about changing the system on the fertilizer on the planter. It's a bad time for the farmers, and it's a bad time for us as well.
Sure. Do you guys, you've got ground-driven pumps, you've got electric pumps, you've got hydraulic-driven pumps. Is there a certain, if a guy's maybe looking at retrofitting the planter that he's got now, or maybe he's going to order a new planter, is there a certain liquid fertilizer system that you guys are pushing, recommending, that are problem-free or as minimal problem as can be? What are you guys pushing, and what do you like?
So, for the electric drive planters that are out there already, the exact rate system it makes sense. It's pretty cost effective from John Deere, and like I said, you can put it on yourself as a farmer. If I was retrofitting a planter that was not electric drive or a different brand planter or something like that, I try to go with the hydraulic drive pump. It's a little bit more complex, but what it does is it gives you the ability to speed up and slow down the pump and vary your rate, or to just keep a consistent rate while you change speeds, versus a piston-style pump that's going to, as you go faster, it does put on the higher rate, but it also increases your pressure, sometimes too far for the red balls and the John Blue. But anyway, so I try to go with the hydraulic drive. You can piece together a system using a sprayer pump and a flow meter and a rate controller of some sort. That works well. You can also, SurePoint has a lot of kits off the shelf if you would just like to call them and say, hey, I've got this planter, I'd like to buy a kit, install it, and you have all the pieces there.
Okay. I'm interested to see what you are excited about planting in the future.
Yeah. So I've already kind of mentioned that I'm a fan of autonomy and autonomous tillage and things coming down the road that are here now. But in planting in particular, I am excited for more automation. So that may be a bad thought to some people because they want simpler. But here's where my thinking is. With cameras in the furrow, looking at the furrow and the seed trench and saying, this is sidewall compaction, this is not. Just all of those possibilities that we get out now and we try to dig and we try to sort through. But if we can get vision or other sensors on the row that can look at that and make a determination based off of that. I don't want them just riding back there and telling me, hey, the seed is 2 inches deep all the time. I want it to make a choice and adjust the planter for me. So I want it to automate my vacuum for singulation. I want it to automate my downforce for minimizing sidewall compaction, but yet maintaining seed depth. Things like that are very near are what excites me the most about that, because there are 100 things going on in the farmer's head, and he's just got to pick the one that's most blaring in his face at the moment to address, and it's not always what the seed trench looks like. So the more we can automate that and take some things off the plate of the guy in the cab, the better. Another thing I'm excited about is this spring we'll be able to running autopath boundaries. So again, taking something off the plate of the operator. I think one of the most stressful passes in the planter is the outside pass. So having an accurate boundary and being able to auto track that whole pass is, I think, and miss the telephone poles and be able to weave them still. You can even weave them next to the road. So being able to do that with a good boundary, I think will take some stress off their plate. And then as well, with AutoPath, with a machine or an implement receiver, being able to actually back the tractor into the corner and get a nice square corner using AutoTrack.
It's amazing when you set the tone, whether that be with a strip till bar or maybe a pre-plant and a hydrous bar, and then you plant. We side dress on our farm, and then you come back with the sprayer and the combine, and when you can kind of get in a method to the madness, and you pull into the same field and you do it the same way over and over again, it takes some operator thought process away, and it takes some fatigue away that, when you're trying to get up in a corner, and we farm in an area that we don't farm a bunch of square 80s, and we've got some twists and some turns, and it's you take a 24 row, 16 row planter, and you get in some of the areas that we got to get into, and you've got to really think about that. And one of the things that I'm excited, especially with the strip till bar coming, is being able to have that lane laid out for us, and having a computer, maybe say this is your best way, than it is to try to sit there and think. Because I've had really good intentions when I'm on the south end of the field, and by the time I get to the north end of the field, I'm really frustrated with myself.
Yeah. Yep. And you look back and you see the rows and you think, man, it's not as straight as my dad would have done it.
Yeah. Or the neighbor. And then you're like, the neighbor's going to see this, and this is going to be frustrating. So that
is the worst.
That is the worst. That is the worst.
Do you feel with the autonomy coming down the road that equipment will tend to keep getting bigger, or do you think it will go smaller and run 24 hours a day?
This is in no way based on knowledge that I have. This is all my opinion. My opinion is that we've about reached the maximum limit for width and size, and it will start to get smaller. I don't know that I think it'll go down to 1 row planter, but it might go to a 6 row. That's where I could see it. It ended up maybe you have a few 6 row planters instead of one 24 row planter.
We can edit this if you don't like what I'm about to ask you, but you and I've talked about this before, and you kind of really think that we're going to show up on a trailer with robots, and those robots are going to place the seed at a certain depth. They're going to place a shot of fertility next to it, and the consistency of what we do is across the board is going to be replicated on an 80-acre field.
Yep. Yeah, at that point, we don't have to worry about corn root balls anymore left over from the last year, because the machine is going to be precise enough that it can actually just place the seed rather than a blade running across the ground at 10 miles per hour with wheels on it to set the depth.
It's attractive from a labor standpoint, because, people that want to work the hours and the seasons that row crop farming does, especially, it's really labor intensive in the spring. It's really labor intensive in the fall. And labor's a concern. And that's an attractive piece of the autonomy that can be done. The is it going to be cost effective for operations to be able to invest in that technology and use it?
I think it has to be. I mean, if it's not when it first comes out, it will be if it doesn't sell. So, I mean, it just has to be. And I think there's a lot, I know from John Deere's viewpoint, there is a lot of research being done on what that dollar amount should be. And yes, I think it will be. I think it will be cost effective for the farmer that farms 800 acres. And I think it will be cost effective for the farmer who's farming 15,000 acres. Because if we do what we were talking about, if we go to multiple 6-row planters, all of a sudden you can scale that. You can scale that to 10 of them if you're a larger farm. You can scale it to 1 if you're a smaller farm. So, yeah, I do think it will be.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on, and we kind of skipped over, and I want to back up and go do it again, but the seed size and seed shapes, and one of the things that we as farmers, and Randy Dowdy and David Hula, and we talked about the flag test and getting emergence within 12 hours of each other and trying to get that accomplished. And, there's some other guys that's come out and said, okay, we do that with a flag test, but that really happens at the germination side of it is when we really can control that. And some of the seed companies and the meters that are out there on the marketplace today, we all want that racehorse hybrid. We all want that big yield. But what seed size and shape should we be really focused on trying to get that hybrid with that seed size and shape in our barn to plant that's going to give us the best performance in these meters?
I've seen some interesting stuff on larger seed producing a larger corn crop, especially when it comes to corn.
Big people breed big people.
Yes, exactly. Same thought. But when it comes to the planter performance, number one is consistency. So if you buy a bag of seed and it has a very generic term for what shape or size the seed is, don't expect consistency. So try to steer clear of those bags of seed. They may be a little more maybe a little cheaper, but try to steer clear of those. If you can get consistent seed, we can adjust the planter to work with that seed size. So that's the number one thing. Obviously, if we get too large or too small, that causes the headaches. So the middle 50% is where we would like to be, whether it's flat or round.
So you're saying in that 45 pounds to unit up to 65, or what do you feel like that sweet spot is?
That would probably be it. Yep. And for anyone that is running an ExactEmerge planter, we can't always pick that. I should add that too. I'm not naive enough to think that every year the seed corn company is going to have the size and shape of seed that I want. But
you sure can have a wish list, though.
Yeah, that's right. You can. But there are other seed bowls available. Like even I wanted to put in a plug for the John Deere on ExactEmerge. They introduced a new seed bowl from last year to this year. There always has been just one for corn, but they've got a new one that came out that is better for small seed. So better singulation at that.
Okay. What on the soybean side of it? We are a dealer and push BW Fusion products, and I don't know. Greg McClure over in Illinois has done some really interesting stuff with soybean, and basically taking a pro box and splitting in a third, the biggest third, the middle third, and the smallest third, and then planted them accordingly, and then took that to yield, and it kind of follows suit. The biggest yielding bean is the biggest bean that's in that box, and Greg has said that the seed companies do a really good job in sizing and sorting corn. We get a box of beans and it says there's 2,800 seeds per pound, and he says there's quite a bit of discrepancy from the smallest seed in there to the largest seed in there. So, on these soybean things, and as we pay attention to seed size, singulation, spacing, and we've invested in technology of a soybean planter to treat it to accomplish what we can with a corn planter. Is there, again, going back to big people breed big people, and if you want to plant bigger beans, is there the performance of the ExactEmerge soybean bowl and the amount of vacuum that we need to carry on that? Have you seen any interesting turnout from that in a planter?
So on the ExactEmerge side, when it comes to soybeans, I think just the shape of the seed, being a round seed, and you've got a round hole in a disc, that it causes less issues than what we have with corn. So it's a lot more forgiving. Vacuum levels forgiving, seed size is forgiving. So I think that's that for soybeans. But one thing I will say is, in the trials that we've done, there are considerable gains to go into ExactEmerge over a traditional vacuum bean planter. And I think for a long time we've always thought, well, spacing doesn't matter as much on soybeans, but it does. It's affected yield, and then also we got to think about harvest. So guy brings his combine in, you're harvesting along, and you have 3 bean plants, and then you have a space, and then you have another bean plant. Well, that bean plant that's by itself, it grows into a corn stalk. It's got a base that is an inch in diameter. Well, running that draper head across there or auger head, it's got a limit on how much it can cut off. And so we end up leaving little stems with beans on out there, and that's yield that you're just leaving out in the field. So I think there's more than just yield to think about. Yield from properly spacing the beans, but there's also harvestability.
Some would make the argument that on the soybean is more important on spacing than what the corn plant is.
I think we're learning a lot about soybeans.
Yeah, and Greg, I keep reference Greg McClure, but he will tell you that if you aren't breaking a sickle section while cutting soybeans, you're not trying. And some of the things that we can do with plant structure and stem diameter in soybeans is kind of an amazing thing. But I just, the information you've given today and the things that you've shared with us, and what we wanted to do is our goal is just to help guys, here's a checklist and here's what I need to look at, and maybe they had a problem a year ago. Everybody slept since then, and we're ready to get back in it. And what's a refresher course of things that we need to look at? And I'm gonna throw. We can edit it if you get mad about it, but I probably won't. Nope. Today, you guys can kind of see why we call Craig Benedict John Deere Jesus, or the Moline Messiah, and his information on the technology side of it, the equipment side of it, is vastly impressive. And Craig has been a huge part of our family farm and our operation for, like I said, 20 years, and appreciate him and his knowledge. And he won't tell you this, but I do believe the guy's got a photographic memory. And I just, this is our first podcast, and I think we're ready to wrap up. I don't know if there's anything else that you guys want to visit about or do, but I just thank you, man. We appreciate it, and the being able to share that knowledge and give that to guys and improve their crop is our goal here.
That's right. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Hopefully, people can make this useful. Thank you. So, like a lot of things that you do the first time, it's awkward. You make mistakes. So we're circling back, and there's something that we felt we got done here, and we wanted to talk and visit and make sure we checked the boxes we wanted to check. And one of the things that Craig brought up was software updates.
Yeah, so like it or not, that technology is a big part of the planting package, tractor and planter, auto steer, things like that. And one of the things that would be very beneficial to your first day of planting is if you could get the tractor hooked up to the planter, and even now, February, March timeframe, get it hooked up, get the pieces of precision ag equipment in the cab that you're going to use, and then working through the process of software updates, pulling it down from Stellar Support or whatever other online version that you have, updating those displays and receivers, but also if you have a technician that could stop by and update the tractor, update the planner, make sure that those software levels are the same accordingly to try to eliminate. So whenever companies release a software patch now, John Deere anyway, they are looking at what's the software version on the tractor, and what's the latest software version on the tractor, what's the latest software version on the planner, and do they work well together? And that way, just to try to prevent software conflicts for the customer. So it's a good idea to get them out, get the Precision Ag updated, get the pieces of equipment updated by the dealership, or if you have the ability to do that on your own. So through the equipment mobile app, or if you have customer service advisor, things like that. Just to try to help get that first day, make it go as smoothly as possible.
So one of the things that I'm going to touch back to Beck's agronomist, and one of the things that he said, and the more years go by, the more it makes sense. The guys that are wildly successful are really good at the basic things, whether that's getting planting done in a timely manner or just simply being prepared. And one of the things that I laugh about, there's still some guys, and you said this and it made me think of it, there's still some guys out there that go to the field to plant that day and they took the tractor up for the first time.
Right.
And you know, then they're frustrated because something's not working properly. They call you, and the lack of planning on their part results in emergency on yours. And again, I'm referencing Bill Mort here. So, but
my 4020 and McKinsey planner.
It's a 494 planner with the rod that goes down that tells him it's out of seed. He didn't need no monitor. But being prepared, and you know, the having your tractor ready to go, having these things gone through, and you know, just checking off the boxes as you go down through in the next 40 or 60 days makes life simpler. Because you know, we have a 2019 where you run out of things to do by mid-May and you're pulling your hair out, or you have a 2024 where you know you can kind of get after it pretty quick, and you know it can be over before you really feel like you got started. So you know the simple things, and you can't stress that enough. And you know, the KISS, keep it simple, stupid, and you know, software updates is a big part of it. I remember I got the real bright idea that Mark Truster put in my head to go plant soybeans in March 10th of 2021. We had hooked the planter up, and help me out here, there's a code in there, and you guys had an update where the receivers quit working from
SF2 to SF1.
It was the 3,000. You had to go to the 3,000. The
ITC. Yeah.
That happened somewhere in that break of 2021. I went to the field and planted 20 acres March 10th with markers, and I'll admit it. It was embarrassing that how I planted with markers, not having GPS. So I would have, if my grandpa would have been alive, he would have probably not been too impressed with my skill set there.
He wouldn't think you were much of a farmer. You can't plant a straight row.
No. So, but yeah, that's a great thing to point to and touch on, and I don't know. Before we jump off here, is there
the more successful the farmers are in having a good first day and a good planting season, the easier our life is at Reynolds.
Yeah.
So we are just as invested at trying to make sure that the farms all have a successful and easy planting season as well.
It does make everyone around the situation, things go smoother, and attitudes are better.
Right.
So that at the Mort farm, when things don't go right, grumpy Greta gets out of control pretty quick.
Yep.
But
the farm has one.
Some days it's me. I'm not going to lie. Some days it's me. But is there anything else that before we jump off here? Is there anything else we need to touch on?
That's all.
Well, guys, thank you again for joining us and listening to what we had to say. And we hope this is useful, and there'll be more to come.